If you want to get to know the differences between the IELTS General Training Test and the CELPIP, this video is for you. In today's video, we're going to go over the differences in format between the IELTS General Training Test and the CELPIP for all 4 skills. I'm also going to answer the most common question we get, which is, which test is easier? Ready? Let's go! All right, today's video is going to be about the main differences and the pros and cons between the IELTS and the CELPIP. So the IELTS stands for International English Language Testing System, so it is offered internationally. The CELPIP, on the other hand, stands for the Canadian English Language Proficiency Index Program, and it's only offered in Canada and a couple of other countries. They are expanding, but they are not as popular as the IELTS. So today we're going to focus on the General Training IELTS. We will not be talking about the Academic Training IELTS because the CELPIP does not have an academic version. So the CELPIP is only used for immigration or citizenship applications, and the general training is also used for immigration application programs. Most people will be applying either for the Express Entry program in Canada or a provincial nominee program. So let's talk about the band scores and how they differ for your application. So the CLB stands for Canadian Language Benchmark. And when you start your immigration process, it's really important that you identify what CLB you need to qualify for a program. Of course, the higher band score you get on the exam, the more points you'll get, and that's why most people need a CLB 9, which is quite advanced. But some people can get away with lower band scores, and you'll need at least a CLB 7 to apply for a program. At least for the Express Entry. So let's talk about the IELTS in terms of the band scores. The band scores on the IELTS will range from a 0 to a 9. So 0 meaning you didn't even show up to the exam, and a band 9 that you are a native speaker. The CELPIP ranges from 0 to 12. Now that doesn't mean that they have different proficiency levels, it's just their score rating. One difference lies in the fact that the CLB on the IELTS is not the lowest score. Instead, it's a combination of band scores. So if you need, for example, a CLB 9, you will need an 8 on the listening, a 7 on the reading, 7 on the speaking, and 7 on the writing. A lot of people assume that because you need a CLB 9, you need a 9 on the exam, and that's not the case. All of this information can be found on the official Canadian government website, so you can see which band scores you need. Now, the CELPIP is quite different. They don't take an average or a mixed band score. They actually consider your CLB as the lowest score you got on the exam. So let's say you got a band 12 in the listening, a band 11 in the reading, an 8 on the writing, and a band 7 on the speaking. Your CLB will actually be a CLB 7. So if you need a CLB 9 on the CELPIP, you need a minimum 9 on any and all of the skills. So let's talk about some differences in terms of the format, okay? So starting with the listening test on the IELTS is 30 minutes long, and there are 4 recordings. The recordings do get progressively more difficult. Now, there is something important for you to know. The IELTS does have the new computer-delivered IELTS, and we've gotten some really good feedback on the quality of the audio, and many candidates have said that it has made their listening test easier, and as a result, they've gotten better band scores. There is one new difference, though, between the computer-delivered IELTS and the paper-based IELTS. The paper-based IELTS is 30 minutes of audio plus an additional 10 minutes for you to transfer your answers to the official answer sheet. The computer-delivered IELTS does not have the additional 10 minutes. Instead, there are a couple of minutes after each section for you to review the answers you have put in on the computer. The CELPIP listening test is substantially longer. As you can see, it's between 47 to 55 minutes, and there are 6 recordings on the test. Now, the big difference in terms of the IELTS and CELPIP in the listening are the accents. A lot of people find the IELTS listening test to be more challenging because you will be exposed to a range of accents, either from Canada, the United States, the UK, or Australia. So a lot of students do find that that can impact their band score. The CELPIP test uses solely Canadian accents. So that is a benefit of taking the CELPIP. Of course, we always encourage people to try doing a few mock tests, the free ones on, of course, the official websites. That would be Paragon Testing or IELTS.org, IELTS Canada, or the British Council, so that you can get an idea of which listening test you prefer. Moving on to the reading test. The IELTS reading test is 60 minutes long, and there are 3 sections. Again, the third section is always going to be harder than the first, and there are 40 questions. The question types are quite different than the CELPIP, and that is something that we go over in class. However, the strategies that we encourage to use on a reading test, on an English proficiency test, are quite similar. The reading test on the CELPIP is about the same duration, about 55 to 60 minutes. There are 38 questions and 4 sections. Now, in terms of format, the IELTS can be done both on paper or computer, and the CELPIP can only be done on a computer. All right, let's talk about the biggest difference here. It's the speaking test, and this is where I think students really struggle on the CELPIP, and what could ultimately make their decision be whether or not they do the IELTS or the CELPIP. This is kind of like the breaking point. On the IELTS, whether you're doing the computer-delivered IELTS or the paper-based IELTS, your speaking exam will always be in person with an examiner. This is really important for you to know. A lot of people assumed that the new computer-delivered IELTS would have a computer-based listening test, and that's not the case. I'm really happy they maintained it with an examiner because it makes the results much more natural, or the assessment rather. Now, the CELPIP test is always on the computer. Although humans, examiners, do assess your performance, you do have an examiner listening to your responses, the actual test itself is held on a computer, so you will be speaking into the computer. The IELTS speaking test ranges from 11 to 14 minutes, and there are 3 parts. And the CELPIP speaking test ranges from 15 to 20 minutes, and there are 8 speaking tasks. So the biggest difference is that the CELPIP test has timed responses on a computer. So that means that for a question, you'll be given between 30 to 60 seconds to read the question, understand the question, and think of your ideas. And then you'll have to speak with a timer between 60 and 90 seconds, depending on the task that you are doing. So a lot of students, even a native speaker, might find this challenging because having to read a question, analyze it thoroughly, and to think of ideas in 30 seconds can be challenging. Also, speaking with a timer can be a bit unnatural. Not everyone is used to speaking with a timer since we don't do that in our everyday lives, so this can impact your performance. On the other hand, the IELTS speaking test is much more natural because you are speaking with a human, with an examiner who is eliciting and asking you questions to guide you throughout the test. So at least in my opinion, I find the IELTS speaking test to be much more natural. Another factor to consider is privacy. The IELTS speaking test is held in a silent room, just you and your examiner. Whereas the CELPIP speaking test is held in an exam center. Each candidate has their own computer, but you are in an exam center environment with other people speaking or typing while you are trying to think and do your speaking responses. So a lot of candidates have given us feedback that they found the environment affected their performance as they got distracted by the noises around them. Of course, each person is different. These are just facts here and our opinions about the differences in the test. Only you can make the final decision about which speaking test you prefer. Moving on to the writing test, which is a section that most candidates struggle with. The IELTS writing test has 2 versions. You can do it on paper or on the computer. Most students give us good feedback about the computer version. They find it easier to type their responses. It reduces the risk of the examiner not understanding your penmanship, when you write by hand. So we would encourage the computer-delivered IELTS. And the CELPIP, of course, is always on a computer, so that is a good benefit. Now, the IELTS writing test consists of 2 writing tasks, and you have 60 minutes to complete both. Again, you have to manage your time. We do teach our students time management because that's an important aspect of your exam prep. The CELPIP writing test is between 53 and 60 minutes, and you have the same 2 writing tasks. Now, task 1 on either exam is the same. The IELTS and the CELPIP task 1 test for the writing is the same. It's a 150-word letter that you have to write to someone, and they will be determining whether or not your writing is formal or informal according to the question you have gotten. The biggest difference lies in task 2. On the IELTS, task 2 is a 250-word essay. There are quite a few tips and strategies when it comes to writing an IELTS essay. There's quite a few different types of questions you might get, and it's really important to prepare accordingly. Our students are taught all of the approaches that we would need to teach them so they can get a Band 7 on the writing test, including task analysis, understanding IELTS questions, understanding the IELTS essay formats that work best, how to prepare your essay in 5 simple steps, and how to write an essay successfully according to the assessment criteria. On the other hand, the CELPIP Task 2 writing is substantially shorter. It's only a 150-word survey response. Now, a lot of students assume that because it is shorter, that it's easier. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's easier. The CELPIP examiners also have quite complex assessment criteria, and you still have to meet all of their criteria, and only an exam expert who understands the assessment criteria can give you feedback based on that. So for both of these exams, it's a lot more about understanding the assessment criteria. At the end of the day, only about 50% of your band score is based on your performance and accuracy with your grammar and vocabulary. It has a lot more to do with your task analysis, if you understood the question and fully responded to it, and how you organized and structured your responses and linked your ideas. So there's a lot more to it than just the word count, your perfect grammar or vocabulary. And of course, we work on all 4 aspects of the assessment criteria, which do include your accuracy in grammar and vocabulary. So the biggest question we get is, which one is easier? Now, this will depend on the individual. Of course, we have a lot of experience with this, and we can give you some feedback and pointers on this, but at the end of the day, each person is different, and it's really important that you do some mock tests to get an idea as to which one you feel most comfortable with. While some students find the CELPIP listening to be easier, they struggle so much in the speaking that they choose the IELTS. On the other hand, some IELTS students switch to the CELPIP because they find the writing on the IELTS to be more challenging. So of course, it really depends on each person. The candidates usually find the CELPIP speaking test more challenging. The CELPIP speaking test, as we mentioned, is timed on the computer, and you really have to practice with drilling. Candidates find the CELPIP listening a little bit easier than the IELTS, yes, and the topics on the IELTS can definitely be a little bit more challenging. The CELPIP topics are a little bit more about everyday life, especially about life in Canada, so the topics could be a little bit easier for you. Now, having said all of that, a lot of students ask us if they should do the IELTS or the CELPIP. So I'm going to give you my personal opinion in this video, but like I said, you've got to make the final decision. For those of you that need a CLB 7 or a CLB 8, I think both exams work just fine. The CELPIP has its benefits and cons, and so does the IELTS. I particularly prefer the computer-delivered IELTS either way. But if you need a CLB 9, in my opinion, I would strongly encourage the computer-delivered IELTS. I find that most students, even native speakers, tend to struggle with the writing and the speaking test on the CELPIP, and as a result, they get a bit frustrated. So they choose the CELPIP because the listening is easier, but then they end up getting a band 7 or an 8 on the speaking, and they end up losing their CLB 9. So in most cases, it's been worth it to just keep studying a bit harder on the IELTS writing until you get that band 7, because the speaking test is much more reasonable and most students can achieve a band 7 on it if they practice. So that's my personal opinion. Nothing against the CELPIP. I just find that the IELTS General Training Test, especially the new computer delivered version, is a more standardized and internationally renowned test. But the CELPIP definitely has its advantages. Definitely try both tests, see which one you like. We can help you make that decision if you contact us. We'll send you our email shortly. But yeah, if you have done the test, send us feedback so we can know what you think. I mean, some people love the CELPIP, some people hate it, and same thing with the IELTS, okay? So everyone's different. Now, finally, what is the most efficient way to prepare? Getting feedback and corrections based on the exam assessment criteria is your key to success. If you aren't getting feedback and personalized corrections based on the performance standards, you will not get the band score that you need. Both the IELTS and the CELPIP have very clear and complex assessment criteria, and only someone who understands them completely can give you that feedback. So that would be our biggest tip and guidance in terms of how to prepare for these exams. The listening and the reading there are some strategies, definitely, but most students need help getting feedback and corrections on their speaking and writing tests. So if you are planning on preparing for your exam, whether it be the IELTS or the CELPIP, you can count on us. We are a team of Canadian exam experts. We've got years of experience coaching students to get the band scores they need on both exams. We fully understand what the examiners expect of you, and we give you feedback based on that, so that way you can get the band score you need. If you've been trying the exam over and over and over again and you're feeling frustrated, it's probably that you are not jumping through the hoops and understanding what you have to do to get the band score. So send us an email. We do start with an initial assessment that is complimentary. We need to know the CLB that you need, and we will start with a writing assessment to get an idea as to where you might be going wrong or what you need to work on. All of our study plans are personalized, so we tailor our classes according to your objectives and your needs. And all of our biographies, testimonials of thousands and hundreds of students that we've helped are available on our website. Our study plans, our suggested study plans, can also be found there. Of course, if you don't need to prep for an exam, we offer general English classes as well. But do check us out at englishforcanada.com. You can follow us on our social media accounts as well, where we post tons of tips on the 2 exams, all right? Well, we look forward to helping you in class, and if you've got any questions, send us an email. See ya!